Hello, I am Claudia Luke. I'm the director of the Center for Environmental Inquiry at Sonoma State University, and I'm also a co-founder of the Virtual Field. The Virtual Field is a collaboration of field stations and marine labs across the world. We're all interested in bringing our field stations to a wider audience through the use of virtual materials. Now, one of our projects is the Ecosystem Exploration Series. And this is a collection of videos that helps students to learn new skills, such as observation, communication, and even critical thinking needed to find evidence of ecosystem processes. If you haven't done so yet, I highly recommend that you take a look at the Ecosystem Exploration video series and try out some of the exercises before you think about starting to create some content. So to do that, you just go to virtual visits and you click on Ecosystem Exploration, and you'll find a whole series of different field stations ecosystem exploration videos in a list down here. So you can just click on one of those, and then you'll find the video itself, and then some educational exercises down here. There's 4 of them that are scaffolded, and I recommend, like I said, that you take a look and at least answer one question out of each of these. Okay, so with that, let's turn and get started to doing our own videos. So the first thing to do is to get the 10-step worksheet for making one of these EE videos. And you do that by clicking on Contribute Content. All of the different content that you can upload to the virtual field is included on this page. But the first one here is Ecosystem Exploration. And you'll see that one of the options here is the EE Video 10-Step Worksheet. So when you get to the worksheet, you'll see there's some background information, but it outlines what the 10 steps are here for making an ecosystem exploration video. So this video, we're going to be taking a look at the first 2 steps. So let's get started. If you go down to the bottom of the page, you'll see there. So step 1. Now, before we start, there's 2 things that I want to mention. One is that remember who your audience is and what their experience is. This is a project in which our viewers have come from all sorts of different experiences in all sorts of other habitats. So somebody has just been in an underwater marine environment, or they've been in a salt marsh, they've been on top of a mountain, and they're coming to your site. So really the content that we're developing for these videos is on a big picture. We're saying, why does this ecosystem look different from that ecosystem? And I have found this process to be really fun because we tend to focus narrowly down on what's on our site. Oh, here's a gall, and here's the this, and here's the that. Here's natural history. And instead, we need to be thinking, why is this here? So just to give you that perspective, that's the level that we're trying to develop content for. The second thing I wanted to point out is just an orientation piece. When you look at this spreadsheet, you'll see that there's some cells that are in yellow, and these are the areas where we're asking you to enter information. Often this information will be carried forward to other tabs as you build the educational materials. And the other thing we've provided is in each cell is an example. So there's a light blue italics note there, so you can see what not typical, but what kinds of answers that we're looking for. Okay, so that said, let's look at the first 4 steps. The first 4 things is really just about describing your ecosystem. So the first job is to choose an ecosystem. One thing about that is just that people use the word ecosystem in a lot of different ways, and the way we're using it is basically you choose a biome, something like woodland, forest, marsh, something like that. and then you add a specific descriptor on the beginning, like white cedar swamp or oak bay woodland, something along those lines. So you're characterizing the type of biome that it is. So we recommend that you start with something that you're just really familiar with, like that you often give tours in. It doesn't have to be a rare location at your field station or marine lab. So once you've chosen your ecosystem name, then just give us some basic descriptions. So one is an image. That would be great. We need a couple of images of what a typical ecosystem looks like, and we ask you to find something that is not copyrighted. And there's a link here in the worksheet that you can get some tips on how to find that. The other thing, you can give us a photo that's yours. Then a climate description on the level of what kinds of climatic variables are limiting the boundaries of your ecosystem. That kind of level, like what can your ecosystem tolerate? What is it tolerating and what is it not tolerating? So something along that for climate description. And then the fourth one, of course, is an ecosystem description. So the example that we had with the alkali sink scrub, an ecosystem description needs to be short. So this one is alkali sink scrub forms in desert basins that don't have an outlet. In those areas, the evaporation exceeds precipitation, and because there's so much salt in the soil, you get these low scattered scrubs. So something along those lines. What are the factors that are defining the ecosystem? And then the next part, you have rows 5 through 12. And this is the basis for creating the video, in the sense that we're now going to identify what are those characteristic features, those defining features of this particular ecosystem that we want to help people focus on when they come to view your video. So this is a cheat sheet for that. You don't have to fill all of these in. In some cases, it might not all apply, but I think they're really good prompts for thinking about the major features on our sites. So the first is what are distinguishing abiotic and biotic features. It might not have come out in the previous example, but this idea is just to give yourself a list, just a prompt list to say, okay, these are the major abiotic, these are the major biotic. Then, how did this particular ecosystem form? I think this is a really good exercise in really thinking through what are the factors that are needed to create this particular site. Like, is it glaciation that created shallow soils, which resulted in this stunted growth, or whatever other way that particular ecosystem developed? Another piece of that might be there could be types of disturbances that are needed in order to maintain the ecosystem. Not just any disturbance that occurs there, but what is a key process? So for example, in California, fire is needed or grazing is needed to maintain grasslands. Otherwise, you get scrubland invading and it wouldn't be there anymore. So that's a kind of disturbance that you might want to list. Sometimes species is really important. There could be a keystone species. So that's a critical factor. If you drop that species, would the whole ecosystem collapse? That's the kind of species we're looking for, not just a list of who all is there. Community, sometimes there's interactions among the species, the plants and animals that are in your ecosystem that are mandatory for survival. So for example, if you have a keystone species and it has to be pollinated by a particular insect, then that would be a community interaction that's required. And then adaptations, that's also a great one. These are just general things that the organisms living in this ecosystem need to deal with. So in the desert, it might be adaptations for drought. And you could point out what these might look like, or physiology or behavior, or whatever. Also, humans are now a big part of the world, the planet, and so wherever you go, you're going to see some kind of human impact. So you might want to point out research plots that are at your site, or you might want to point out erosion caused by soil compaction or something along those lines. And then we left an additional, category. And that's it. Once you've scoped that out, then we're going to go on to step 2. Step 2 is about identifying evidence at your site for these key ecosystem processes that you identified in step 1. So you'll notice now on your spreadsheet, not on mine because I wasn't entering information, but on your spreadsheet, this whole column, defining features and processes, is just auto-populated from step 1. It helps you now to say, okay, I've done that first step of work, let's do the second step. And the second step is to identify what is the evidence that you might have at your site for those particular characteristics. So you might want to, for example, in our alkali scrub ecosystem, show the mountains and the basin. Can you show that important feature that this actually is an alkali scrub? Other variables that are on here are just the same as what you've just gone through. So evidence of the formation of your ecosystem, disturbance that occurs within your ecosystem, the species, all the same thing. You're just going through and trying to figure out, what could I film that would specifically look at that feature or process that is unique or is needed for the ecosystem I've identified. I'd recommend that you don't limit yourself yet thinking, oh, how am I going to film that? Or where can I, it would be too far away from step 1 to step 2, any of that. Don't think about any of that. Just brainstorm it and come up with as many different types of evidence as you can find. So that's it for this video. You can see that in steps 1 and 2, we've built a list of what you might want to film at your site. And in the next video in the series, which is Film Your Video, we'll find a location, gather equipment, and practice filming. See you then.